Your kids don't fit in at the ski resort, my sister texted. My brother's kid deserves a real vacation, not your budget drama. My kids had been selling snacks after school to save for the trip. I replied, understood, then I reserved the entire luxury chalet weekend. When they reached the front desk, the manager looked at my sister's ID and said, "You're not on his guest list." The mason jar of quarters and crumpled dollar bills sat on the kitchen counter next to my daughter's snack sales notebook, and I was counting the last of it when my sister's name lit up my phone. $487.25. 3 months of my kids selling granola bars and clementines to their classmates at Woodmere Elementary in Newton, Massachusetts. At 75 cents a snack, tracked in Marisol's blue spiral notebook in her round 11-year-old handwriting with hearts around the totals for the days when Theo had run out of stock. I set the jar down. I picked up the phone. I read the text. It said, "Your kids don't fit in at the ski resort. My brother's kid deserves a real vacation, not your budget drama. We booked separately this year. See you in the spring." I read it twice. I put the phone face down on the counter. I finished counting the coins. $487.25 was exactly what Marisol had calculated the family portion of the Alpine Crest weekend would cost. Minus the room fee, split 3 ways with my sister Delilah and my brother Corbin, based on a group text from October that had included me. She had told her 9-year-old brother that they would pay it in cash to Aunt Delilah on Saturday morning so their share was covered before dinner and that nobody would have to feel bad about it. Theo had made her promise. He had counted out his part into a smaller jar under his bed with a rubber duck on top. I picked up the phone. I typed one word, understood. I hit send. I put the phone back down. Then I called Naomi Vestal at the Alpine Crest Chalet at Stowe. She picked up on the second ring the way she has picked up on the second ring for 8 years. Silas, Naomi, my family, is on the list for the Founders Chalet weekend that starts tomorrow. Delilah Merrick Bramwell party of 8. They are. Take them off. She did not answer right away. I said, everyone, Delilah, my brother Corbin, my mother Adele, all the kids on their side of the list. Everyone except Marisol Merrick and Theo Merrick under my name. She said, when do you want it done? Now, she said, consider it done. I need 3 minutes. I said also, I am driving up tonight. I need the West Chalet, the same one B used to book. I need it under my full founder's rate, not the family rate. Charge my visa. I do not want the family rate anywhere on the reservation paperwork tomorrow morning. She said, Silas, is this what I think it is? I said, yes, she said. B would have driven up with you tonight. I said, I know. I hung up. I put the $487.25 back into the mason jar. I put the jar in the front pocket of my duffel bag. I zipped it shut. The bag was already packed. I had packed it 2 weeks ago on the day the group text had confirmed our shared reservation, the same day my daughter had asked me if she should bring her mother's old ski gloves or the mittens she had used last year. I had told her the gloves. Her mother Kira had given them to her at Christmas 2022. 6 weeks before Kira left for Portland and the small deli off Alberta Street where she now runs the counter every weekday from 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. Marisol had not worn the gloves once. She had been saving them. The school bus dropped Marisol and Theo off at 3:32 p.m. I met them at the driveway. I said, bags in the car. We are leaving early. Theo asked if we were still meeting Aunt Delilah at the resort. I said, different plan. Better plan. Get in the car. Marisol looked at me the way she had looked at me the morning her mother had put a suitcase into an Uber 4 years ago. She did not ask. She got in the car with her backpack still on. Theo climbed in behind her and did not put his seatbelt on until I asked him twice. He was watching me in the rearview. Marisol met my eyes once in the mirror and looked away. Family Secret Tales tells the ones that take place at a chalet, in a lobby, with a brass tag and a mason jar, and a name my aunt made sure I would carry. This is one of them. I am Silas Merrick. I am 41 years old, a forensic accountant at Ballantyne and Merton in Boston, and my job is to find money that has been moved on purpose to look like something it is not. I audit hospitality companies mostly, boutique hotels, ski resorts, restaurant groups. 9 years ago, my firm was hired by the parent company of the Alpine Crest Chalet Group, which owns the resort we were supposed to spend this weekend at, to figure out why their quarterly reconciliations kept missing by $300,000 a quarter for 11 quarters in a row. I traced the money over 8 months. The vice president of operations, a man named Terry Halverson, who had been with the company for 18 years and who had a wife with early Parkinson's and a daughter starting college, had been rerouting $4 million in vendor payments through a shell entity in Delaware. The CEO of Alpine Crest, a woman named Mira Ashcroft, who had known Terry since 1994, called me on a Friday afternoon after I had finished the summary memo. She asked me 2 things. First, whether I thought Terry had done it to pay for his wife's care. Second, whether there was any way she could have caught it earlier. I told her yes on the first and no on the second. She said, then this is on him, not on me. She fired Terry that afternoon. She wrote me a personal note the next morning. In the note she said the chalet was mine. Founder's guest tier. Any weekend, any suite, 40% discount extended to my family as long as I wanted to bring them. Lifetime. She sent me a laminated card and a private extension for the concierge desk. That was in 2019. I have been bringing my family to the Alpine Crest Chalet every year since then. My sister Delilah brought her husband Ford and her 2 kids the first year and stayed in a 2-bedroom suite that would have cost her $1,600 a night at rack rate and paid me $900 at the family rate. My brother Corbin brought his wife and his son Rhett the second year. My mother came the third year. Everyone in my family knows about the Founders Tier because Delilah asked me about it in front of everyone at Thanksgiving of 2019. And I explained it once, and I have not talked about it since. What I did not tell anyone, and what I did not know until this January, was that Delilah had been booking the chalet under my Founders Code 4 to 6 times a year without me knowing, at the 40% discount, and had been reselling those weekends to her book club, to her husband's law firm's junior partners, and to a group of women from her CrossFit gym in Wellesley for full rack rate. She had been pocketing the difference. $22,000 in the summer of 2024, $28,000 across 2025, $28,000 more in 2026, $78,000 over 3 years, none of it declared on the joint tax return she filed with her husband, Ford Bramwell, who is a partner at Wilkerson Peel in Boston and who signs those returns without reading them because he trusts his wife. The rest of this story sits on top of one morning I had with my Aunt Beatrice Merrick in February of 2001 when I was 9 years old. Bea was my father Malcolm's older sister. She never married. She ran a small lodge in Waitsfield, Vermont that she had bought from an old Austrian couple in 1978 for cash. She lived there full-time from May to November and kept it open on weekends the rest of the year for a small handful of guests who had been coming since the 70s. When my mother Adele had a bad summer in 1997, and again in the winter of 1999, and again in the winter of 2001, my father drove me up to Bea's lodge and left me there for weeks at a time, and Bea taught me how to cook eggs, and how to check the propane, and how to snowboard on the small hill behind the lodge that she had grown up sledding on in the 50s. On the morning of February 11th of 2001, she woke me up at 6:30 a.m. and took me out to the shed and pulled out a board that had belonged to her nephew, my older cousin who had died in a car accident in Burlington in 1996, and she taught me how to strap in and how to fall right. The snow was up to my knees at the top of the hill. My breath was making small clouds in the porch light before the sun came up. Bea had made hot chocolate in a thermos and had brought 2 mugs in her jacket pocket and had put one of them in my mitten every time I made it back up. I fell 42 times that morning. She counted them. She did not raise her voice once. She never raised her voice. At the end of the morning, when I had made it all the way down the small hill on my feet, she took a small brass season pass tag off her jacket zipper and she clipped it onto mine and she said, "Silas, This is from 1987. It was the first pass I ever bought at Sugarbush after I saved up from the diner. You keep it. When you are grown and you have your own children, you bring them to a mountain and you teach them the way I taught you, and you keep whatever is small in them small until they are ready to grow it themselves. Not everybody in this family will do that. You will. The tag has been on the zipper pull of my ski jacket for 26 years. B died 3 years and 3 months ago at the lodge at 81 from pancreatic cancer that she chose not to treat. She left the lodge to her only surviving niece, my cousin Renata, who lives in Montpellier. Renata calls me twice a year to check in. She invited me and the kids up 2 winters ago. We spent a weekend there. Marisol asked me about the brass tag on the 3rd morning, and I told her the story, and she asked to hold it, and I let her, and she held it for maybe 20 minutes without saying anything. The drive from Newton, Massachusetts to Stowe, Vermont is 3.5 hours if you do not stop, and 4 if you have a 9-year-old. On the way, I told Marisol and Theo that we were going to the chalet a night early, that the rest of the family would be arriving in the morning, that we would be in the West Chalet by ourselves for the weekend, and that the mason jar was staying in my duffel because we were not paying anyone this year. Theo asked why. I said because it turned out we did not need to. Marisol did not ask. She looked out the window at the snow, starting on Route 89 north of White River Junction. She had figured something out already. She figures things out. She gets that from her mother. At the New Hampshire border, Theo asked me what my job actually was. I had told him 3 times, and he was 9. I said, I look at people's numbers, and I find the ones they moved when they thought nobody would look. Theo said, like a detective for math. I said, something like that. He said, are we going because of math? I said, we are going because of a text in a jar in 8 years of somebody using my name. He thought about that. He said, okay. He went back to his book. Marisol asked me one question the whole ride. She asked it in Waterbury, 20 minutes from the chalet at 7:25 p.m. with snow falling in the headlights. She said, Dad, is Aunt Delilah going to yell at you tomorrow? I said, she might, honey. She said, are you going to yell back? I said, no. She said, good. She went back to her book. She was reading The Girl Who Drank the Moon for the 4th time. We pulled into the chalet's guest parking lot at 7:45 p.m. Naomi Vestal was standing in the lobby by the check-in desk in her navy blazer with her hair up in the same silver clip she had been wearing when I first walked into this lobby in 2018 on a Sunday afternoon to introduce myself to the concierge team so they would know the auditor by face. She hugged both kids. She handed Theo a small envelope with a hot chocolate voucher for the fireplace bar. She walked us up to the West Chalet herself. On the way, she stopped at the small concierge desk on the 2nd landing, and she pulled a leather-bound guest logbook out from underneath the desk. It was open to a page dated December 28, 2001. She turned it toward me. B's handwriting was in the middle of the page. It said, Beatrice Merrick and nephew Silas Merrick, age 9, West Chalet, 3 nights, first snowboard weekend for the boy. Next to my name, B had drawn a small pencil circle and had written the word keeper inside it. I had never seen the entry. Naomi had known about it for 8 years. She had waited to show me. I looked at the entry. I looked at Naomi. She said, I was going to show you when Marisol was old enough to see it too. I think tonight is old enough. She closed the book. She put it back under the desk. She walked us the rest of the way up. At the door of the chalet before she left, she said, Silas, I need you at the front desk at 10:45 tomorrow morning. The party is scheduled to arrive at 11. I said, I know. She said, would you like me to handle it? I can do it myself. It does not have to be you. I said, it has to be me. She said, B told me one time in 1999 that you were going to be the one who knew what to do when it was time to do it. I did not know what she meant. I do now. She left. I made the kids grilled cheeses at the small kitchenette. Theo fell asleep on the couch by the fire at 9:10 with the hot chocolate voucher still in his hand. Marisol sat next to me at the small table by the window, and she looked at the brass tag on my zipper pull for a while. She said, "Dad, are we in trouble?" I said, "No, honey." She said, "Is Aunt Delilah in trouble?" I said, "Aunt Delilah made a choice a long time ago. Tomorrow she is going to find out that the choice does not work anymore. That is not trouble. That is Saturday." She thought about that. She said, "Are we going to be okay?" I said, "Marisol, you have been okay this whole time. Tomorrow you get to see it from the front." She nodded. She went to bed. If you are still with me at this point, this is what Family Secret Tales was made for. Quiet families. Loud counters. At 10:45 on Saturday morning, I was standing behind the reception desk of the Alpine Crest Chalet lobby with Naomi Vestal on my left and the assistant manager, a young man named Devin Ruiz, who had been on staff for 18 months, on my right. The lobby was busy. It was the Saturday of a peak season week. 4 families were checking in ahead of my sister's group. A ski butler was walking a couple in matching Bogner jackets toward the private elevator to the executive lounge. 2 teenagers in helmets were arguing about the gondola line. The fireplace was going. The espresso machine was going. My daughter Marisol was standing behind the ficus plant to the left of the concierge desk with Theo next to her. And Naomi had positioned them there specifically so they could see everything and be seen by nobody until they wanted to be. At 11:02, my sister Delilah walked through the front doors in a white puffer jacket, dragging a rolling suitcase and a garment bag. Behind her came my mother Adele in her camel wool coat, my sister-in-law Serena, my niece Piper in a matching pink puffer, and my nephew Rhett, who was 12 and had a snowboard bag over his shoulder that had cost $1,200 at Boston Ski and Tennis 2 Christmases ago. Behind them came my brother Corbin in a black overcoat, holding his phone. Ford was not with them. Ford was in Boston working, per the group text Delilah had sent them the previous week. Delilah did not see me at the desk. I had positioned myself behind Devin. She walked up to the reception with the smile she uses when she is about to name drop. She said, "Delilah Merrick Bramwell, party of 8. We have the Founders Chalet weekend under Silas Merrick's family list." Devin looked at his screen. He tapped once. He said, "I am not showing that reservation, Mrs. Merrick Bramwell." She smiled a smaller smile. She said, "I am sure you are. It is under my brother Silas Merrick. He is a Founders tier guest. This is the 3rd year in a row we have booked this weekend under his name." Devin looked at the screen again. He looked at Naomi. Naomi looked at Delilah. Naomi said, "Mrs. Merrick Bramwell." Mrs. Merrick's guest list for this weekend includes Marisol Merrick and Theodore Merrick. You are not on it. Delilah's smile went flat. Her mother put a hand on her arm. Corbin looked up from his phone for the first time. Piper looked at Rhett. Rhett looked at his mother. Delilah said, "Is Silas here?" Naomi said, "He is." Delilah said, in a voice that carried across the lobby the way she always made her voice carry when she wanted a room to hear, "Silas, come out here." I stepped out from behind Devin. I walked around the front of the desk. I stopped 6 feet from her. Marisol stepped out from behind the ficus plant. Theo stepped out next to her. The couple in matching Bogner jackets stopped by the elevator. The 2 teenagers in helmets stopped arguing. The espresso machine hissed and went quiet. Delilah looked at Marisol's coat. She looked at Theo's coat. She looked back at me. Her mouth opened. She said, "Silas, look at your kids. They are wearing hand-me-down parkas at a 5-star resort." Piper cried at breakfast because she thought Marisol was going to be embarrassed. That is the kind of children you are raising, if you can call it raising. Your ex-wife left you because she was tired of counting pennies with an accountant, and now she counts pennies with a deli register in Oregon while you drag her forgotten kids around New England pretending they belong at places like this. My son deserves a vacation with cousins who do not smell like the store where their mother works. Take them home. Stop making Rhett feel bad about being loved. The lobby went very quiet. Marisol did not move. Theo took a small step closer to his sister. My mother's hand went to her mouth. Corbin looked at his phone again on purpose. My sister-in-law, Serena, took 1 step backwards. Piper's eyes had gone red at some point in the last hour, on the drive up from Boston, in a way that a child does not achieve on her own. I had noticed it walking in. I noticed it now. Delilah kept going. She said, "There must be some mistake, Naomi. We have had this booking for 3 months. My brother is founder's tier. We are family. Pull up the list again." Naomi said, "The list is current as of 8 this morning, Mrs. Merrick Bramwell." Delilah said, "Silas, pull us off this list. Whatever your problem is, this is not the place. There are children here." I said nothing. Delilah said, Fine, then we will pay for our own suite. Right now. Naomi, get me a manager. I will pay the rack rate for the presidential suite. Cash, card, whatever you take. Rhett, put the snowboard bag down. Piper, come here. She had taken out her wallet. Naomi said, "Mrs. Merrick Bramwell, all suites at Alpine Crest this weekend are held under the Founders Tier guest list, which you are not on. There are no rooms available to non-listed guests through Sunday evening. This is a policy set by our Founders program. Mr. Merrick, would you like to speak on this?" I looked at Delilah. I said one thing. I said, "Delilah, the chalet was mine for 8 years. You used my name every year. Today I used mine." Delilah's hand went to the marble reception desk. Her wedding ring hand went to her collarbone. Her weight shifted onto her right foot and stayed there. Her mouth opened and did not close. Her eyes went to Marisol and to Theo and back to me, and she did not blink for a very long time. My mother sat down hard on the leather bench next to the ski butler stand. Corbin walked out the front doors and stood in the parking lot with his phone at his ear. Serena took Rhett by the elbow and walked him toward the fireplace bar. Piper stayed. She was looking at Marisol. Marisol walked out from beside the ficus plant. She walked past Delilah. She walked to Piper. She said, "Piper, do you want a hot chocolate? The fireplace bar has hot chocolate." Piper looked at her mother. Her mother did not look back. Piper nodded at Marisol. They walked together to the fireplace bar. Theo followed them. Naomi handed Devin a paper folder. She said to Delilah, "The nearest available accommodations this weekend are at the Trapp Family Lodge, 22 minutes away, or the Green Mountain Inn in Stowe Village, 12 minutes. I have taken the liberty of calling both. Green Mountain has 1 queen room for $440 a night through Sunday. Would you like the number?" Delilah did not take the folder. She turned around and she walked out of the lobby and into the parking lot. My mother followed her. She was walking slowly, and her hand was on her chest. Corbin was still on the phone in the parking lot, with his back to the door. He had one hand pressed to his forehead. The couple in matching Bogner jackets had not moved. The teenagers in helmets had gone quiet. The ski butler had walked over to Marisol at the fireplace bar and had asked her if she and her brother would like the hot chocolate with the marshmallows or without. She had said with. He had brought 2 mugs. Piper had one too. That was the confrontation. It took 8 minutes. There were witnesses. By Monday morning at 9 a.m., my private note to my brother Corbin's investment fund had come due. I had extended it in October of 2025 as a personal bridge, $180,000 against a $620,000 reserve shortfall his fund had reported to its investors as a temporary treasury alignment, which was not what it was. I had taken the note personally to keep the shortfall out of the fund's SEC filings, because Corbin had come to me the same way he had come to me at 15 when he had wrecked our father's car, quiet and pale and asking. The note had a standard 30-day balloon call clause. On Monday at 9:02 a.m., my paralegal Diane Ortega at Ballantyne and Merton sent the balloon call notice to Corbin's fund and to his outside counsel by certified mail and by email, effective immediately. Corbin had to raise $180,000 in 30 days from a fund that had already been running with a $620,000 hole plugged only by my note. He could not. On Wednesday morning, the compliance chair at Ballantyne and Merton, a partner named Renata Fisk, called me into her office at 10 a.m. I had emailed her Sunday night. I had disclosed the family connection on Corbin's fund audit formally and in writing, effective Sunday, retroactive to the beginning of the audit, and I had asked to be removed from the engagement team. Renata reviewed the disclosure. She told me our firm had a mandatory look-back protocol for anything a partner touched under a family conflict. She told me the audit would be rescoped and expanded. She told me the fund would be looked at, quote, from the joists up. She said, Silas, you know what this is going to find. I said, yes. She said, you are going to lose your brother. I said, I lost him in October of 2025. She nodded once. She signed the paperwork. That was Wednesday. On Thursday afternoon, Mira Ashcroft, the CEO of Alpine Crest, called me personally. Naomi had briefed her Saturday afternoon. Mira had pulled the booking history under my founder's code. She had found the pattern. 3 years of sublet bookings, none of them mine, all of them under my discount rate, all of them cleared through personal Venmo transactions from my sister's Wellesley Fitness Collective Book Club and from a group chat of junior associates at Wilkerson Peel. Mira asked me 2 questions. First, whether I had known. Second, whether I wanted her to handle it internally or refer it out. I told her no on the first and refer it out on the second. She thanked me. She hung up. Alpine Crest's outside counsel filed a fraud complaint with the Massachusetts Attorney General's office on Friday morning, citing 3 tax years of undeclared short-term rental income against Delilah Merrick Bramwell. That was the same afternoon Ford Bramwell received a call from a state investigator at his desk at Wilkerson Peel. He came home 3 hours early. He did not sit in the sunroom with his wife. He sat in his car in the driveway of their Wellesley Colonial for 40 minutes with the engine off before he went inside. That was the financial layer. The social layer landed the following Wednesday, 10 days after the lobby. Naomi Vestal had circulated one document, quietly, to 8 people. Aunt B's daughter, Renata, 2 ski patrol veterans in Stowe, who had known B for 30 years, a woman named Eve Kirschbaum, who ran the Stowe Community Foundation and who had sat next to B on the board for 15 years, 3 parents at Woodmere Elementary, who Marisol had sold snacks to and whose kids were in her class, and Ford Bramwell's mother in Concord, who had liked me since I was 7. The document was a single page, a photograph of Marisol's blue spiral notebook, open to the page where she had totaled the snack money and written under it in her round handwriting for the ski weekend with Aunt Delilah, Uncle Corbin, and Grandma, split 3 ways. Nothing else. No caption, no note. Just the photograph. Within 4 days of Naomi sending that photograph, Ford Bramwell's mother had removed Delilah from a family text thread that had 32 members. She sent a private message to me the same afternoon. It was 2 lines. It said, Silas, my son deserved better, and so does your daughter. I am so sorry. My mother Adele stopped receiving invitations from her bridge group in Newton for the following Wednesday, which they had held every week since 1998. The chair of the bridge group, a woman named June Ellsworth, who my mother had known since 1979, sent a paper note by mail rather than a text. My mother read it at the dining room table with my father Malcolm across from her. She did not come out of the bedroom for the rest of that day. 2 parents at Woodmere sent me email messages I did not answer. Marisol's teacher, a woman named Miss Halverson, no relation to the Terry Halverson from 2019, gave Marisol a card at pickup on Friday that Marisol did not show me until Sunday. In the card, Miss Halverson had written, "You are one of the good ones, sweetheart. You always were." Marisol keeps the card in the front of her spiral notebook now, in front of the totaled snack money page. That was the social layer. The emotional layer came 17 days after the lobby at 2:14 in the morning on a Sunday, at a rest stop on Interstate 89 north of the Vermont border, 22 miles south of Waterbury. I know this because Naomi called me at 6:30 that morning. Naomi's cousin worked the night shift as a Vermont state trooper. He had pulled into the rest stop at 2:14 a.m. to run a check on a stopped vehicle. He had found my sister Delilah alone in her Range Rover, with the headlights off and the engine off, and the ignition still on so the radio was pouring static. Her hands were on the steering wheel. She was in a bathrobe over sweatpants. There was a small carry-on bag on the passenger seat. She had left her house in Wellesley at 11 the previous night without telling her husband. She had driven 3 hours north through a snowstorm. She had stopped at the rest stop because she did not know why she was driving. She had been sitting in the car for 1 hour and 40 minutes when the trooper knocked on the window. He asked her if she was all right. She said she did not know. He asked her if she wanted him to call somebody. She said yes. She gave him my number. He called Naomi, who was still awake, who called me at 6:30. By the time I made phone calls, Ford had already reached her. He drove up from Wellesley in his own car. He picked her up at the rest stop at 8:15 a.m. He put her in his passenger seat. He drove her Range Rover to a truck stop in Waterbury and paid a driver to take it back to Wellesley. He drove Delilah home. I do not know what they said in the car. I have not asked. I do not need to know. Ford does not talk to me anymore, and I do not blame him. He is not the villain of this story. He is a man who signed his wife's joint tax return without reading it for 3 years running. I almost called my mother on the Sunday morning that Naomi called me about the rest stop. I opened her name in my contacts. I looked at the last text she had sent me from December, which had read, "Merry Christmas, honey. See you at Delilah's on the 26th. I closed the app. I picked up the mason jar off my kitchen counter, which had $487.25 in it, and which I had not moved since the morning I had counted it, and I looked at Marisol's notebook next to it. I put the phone in my pocket. I made oatmeal. 22 days after the lobby, on a Friday afternoon at 4 p.m., my niece Piper walked into the reception area of my office in downtown Boston. She was 14. She was carrying a manila envelope. Diane Ortega called me on the intercom. I told her to send Piper in. Piper sat down in the chair across from my desk with her puffer jacket still on. She put the envelope on my desk. She looked at me the way she had looked at Marisol across the lobby 3 weeks earlier. Her eyes were tired. She had walked in from the train station in the rain. Her hair was wet. She had not taken off her backpack. She was still carrying her school books in it. She said, "Uncle Silas, my mom asked me to bring you this." I did not open the envelope. I said, "Piper, does your dad know you are here?" She said, "No." I said, "Does your mom know your dad does not know?" She said, "Yes." I nodded. I said, "Do you know what is in the envelope?" She said, "It is a letter about the house. Mom said if you do not restart the note with Uncle Corbin, we are going to lose the house. She said to tell you that Rhett does not understand what is happening. She said if I told you in person, you would listen. She said you always like me the most." I said, "Piper, did she write down what to say to me?" Piper looked at her lap. She said, "Yes." I said, "Do you have the paper?" She took it out of her coat pocket. It was on the same monogrammed Delilah Merrick Bramwell stationery my sister had used to send my ex-wife a passive-aggressive Christmas card in 2022. There were 4 bullet points in my sister's handwriting. Piper read the first 3 to me. She could not read the 4th one out loud. I opened my desk drawer. I took out a hardcover book that had been in my desk for 22 years. It was a small book called Trees of the Green Mountains by Nathan Woodard, published in 1979. On the inside front cover, in blue ballpoint, was an inscription in Aunt Bee's handwriting. It said, "For Silas, February 11th, 1987, was a very good year. Love, Aunt Bee." I had shown Piper this book once, when she was 7 years old at a 4th of July cookout in Concord. I slid it across my desk to her. I said, "Piper, take this home to your mother. Do not read the inscription. Give it to her when she opens the door. Tell her Uncle Silas said the book stays with her tonight. Tell her the tag stays with me. She will know what it means." Piper took the book. She stood up. She put the paper with the 4 bullet points in her coat pocket. She said, "Uncle Silas, I did not want to come." I said, "I know, sweetheart. Tell your dad the truth about today when you get home. Not your mom, your dad." She nodded. She left. That night I called Ford Bramwell at 6:30 p.m. I told him what had happened. He was quiet for a long time. He said, "Silas, thank you." He hung up. I do not know what he did that evening in his own house. I do not need to. That is where the story sits now. My brother Corbin's fund is in a $180,000 hole he cannot close, plus a $620,000 audit findings letter my firm delivered on the 22nd. His fund's outside counsel has advised him to wind it down before the SEC begins its inquiry. My sister Delilah has an initial appointment with the Massachusetts Attorney General's office scheduled for the second Monday of next month. Ford has moved into the guest bedroom of their Wellesley Colonial. My mother has taken a leave from her book club and from bridge. My father Malcolm called me 2 Sundays ago, for the first time since Christmas, and asked me if the kids were okay. I told him yes. He said, "Your mother is having a bad time, Silas." I said, "I know she is." That was the whole conversation. Piper texted me last Wednesday. Her message was one sentence. It said, "Mom read the inscription and cried for 2 hours. She has not opened the book past the first page. Dad says it is on the mantle." I did not answer the text. I put my phone in my pocket. I went to make Theo a grilled cheese. I almost forgave the note in early April. I had a call from Corbin's outside counsel on a Tuesday afternoon offering to convert the note to equity at a discount. It was a workable deal on paper. I told Diane to write it up. I stopped at 4 p.m. before I signed it, because the calendar on my wall was showing April 8th, and October 8th of 2025 was the day Corbin had sat in my office and asked me for the bridge and had said, quote, "Nobody has to know, Silas, and if this goes right, everybody stays fed." I did not sign the deal. I asked Diane to send back a straight demand letter for the full 180. She did. He is going to have to sell his fund's furniture to pay it. I almost took Marisol's snack jar and put it in the bank on a Saturday morning in April. I stopped because Theo had asked me the night before if his sister's dollars were coming with us to the lodge in April. I said yes. So we brought the jar to Renata's lodge in Waitsfield on April 3rd. Renata met us at the front door in a wool cardigan that had belonged to B. She had made pancakes. She had put out the small red plate B had eaten off of every morning for 38 years. We put the mason jar on the mantel of B's fireplace, next to the small frame photograph Renata keeps of B at 19 years old at Sugarbush in the winter of 1961. Theo learned to snowboard on the beginner hill behind the lodge that morning. Renata brought out an old red board that used to be her father's, and Marisol tried it too. She fell 19 times. She counted them. She said, "Dad, B would have counted these." I said, "She did. She would have." Renata brought hot cocoa out to the porch at 11 a.m. She sat down next to me on the porch bench. She said, "Silas, B talked about you until the day she went. She said you were the one who was not going to let this family swallow you." I said, "I almost let it." She said, "Almost does not count in Vermont. It never has, and it never will." She patted my knee. She went back inside. Marisol held the brass tag on my zipper pull for a long time on the porch after lunch. She said, "Dad, can I have this when I am older?" I said, "Marisol, this tag has 3 names on the back of it. B. Merrick, Silas Merrick." Then a blank line. That 3rd line is yours whenever you want to write it in. She did not write it in that day. She will. 200 miles south, in Wellesley, my sister's driveway had 3 days of mail piled in the box. Delilah had gone up to Bar Harbor with my mother the week before to, quote, "get out of the state," and Ford had not been picking up the mail because he was working late every night now. The Christmas wreath from 3 months earlier was still on their front door. Their neighbor across the street had taken to bringing in their bins on Tuesdays without being asked. My brother Corbin's Range Rover was parked in my mother's driveway in Concord that same Saturday morning. He had been sitting in it for 3 hours. My mother had not gone outside. He had not come inside. Neither of them had picked up a phone. The Range Rover's engine had been off for 2 of those 3 hours. His breath was fogging the driver's side window in a thin oval that would clear and come back and clear and come back. That is the whole ending. Family Secret Tales tells the ones that come out of a mason jar on a kitchen counter, a brass tag on a zipper pull, and a book on a mantel that nobody has opened past the first page. Subscribe, Comment if you counted your kids' quarters this year. There is another one coming Sunday.